You being a Generation Z Black woman in very high level spaces here in Washington, D.C., what is that experience like for you?
First of all, I don't claim Gen Z like that.
Not too much on Gen Z.
If I'm being real, because, working in politics, like when you tell people you're younger and like everyone else around you is like 35 plus at the minimum, it's like kind of awkward sometimes.
If somebody like Sexy Red wanted to start aligning with conservatives or aligning with Republicans, is that bad optics, or is it helpful to have this culturally relevant figure be a part of our orbit?
Culturally relevant to who?
The streets?
I'm just saying, that's the question you got to ask yourself. Like, is that reflective of the culture?
Do you think that conservatives are finally getting better at tapping into culture? Hey cousins, welcome to a very special episode of Respectfully, coming to you here from Washington, D.C. Now, when we talk about all the things that have changed here in D.C., and we talk about winning strategy and the importance of maintaining motion, that conversation starts with a very special name that I would love to introduce you to if you don't already have the privilege of knowing. Her name is Janiyah Thomas. How you doing, friend?
I'm good, friend. How are you?
Blessed and highly favored. Now, Janiyah, I want to summarize in a couple sentences all the things that you do, but that's a very hard thing to summarize. You're a PR strategist. You were Trump's Black media director. How do you explain all the things that you've done and just your impact?
So originally I started off working at the RNC, being a Black media coordinator, and, being strategic in talking to Black voters, how we talk to Black voters from the Republican Party. And that's where we started. And then I ended up going to work for Senator Scott's presidential campaign, and I did a lot of his early state media. And then it turned into a little bit of event planning, planning campaign events or whatever. And I also worked for the convention, which is like the biggest event, every 4 years that we're blessed to have. And that doing comms events, because I think when you think about doing things from a communications perspective, when you're planning an event, like the comms perspective versus, a political person's perspective is two different things. Like I'm always thinking about how things look from the lens of a camera. And then, of course, I, went to work for the president as his Black media director and did the inauguration as well, and, that's one of my claims to fame, I'll say.
One of your many. I know just how deep your impact is based solely on the fact that I went to a breakfast at the White House a few days ago. And when I got there, people kept coming up to me saying, "Are you Janiyah Thomas's friend?" And the second I said yes, it was like doors were opening, applauses were happening. People really appreciate the work that you have done behind the scenes. And I would dare to say that you are one of the most impactful people in the 2024 election cycle. So thank you for all of your hard work and dedication to this country.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Now, I want to get more into some of your experience here in D.C., because D.C. is just such a unique world and a unique space. And you being a Generation Z Black woman in very high level spaces here in Washington, D.C., what is that experience like for you?
First of all, I don't claim Gen Z like that.
Not too much on Gen Z.
If I'm being real, because, working in politics, like when you tell people you're younger and like everyone else around you is like 35 plus at the minimum, it's like kind of awkward sometimes, and being the youngest person in the room sometimes can be uncomfortable. So that's why I don't tell people how young I am unless they ask. So, but being a Black woman in politics, I think when I first came to D.C., it was different. Like, Biden was in the White House. So, we were kind of like on the outskirts, doing things. So it was very different than the vibes now. Now I have like a bunch of random Democrats that want to be my friend all of a sudden. I'm like, where were y'all at 4 years ago? Like, I've been here, where you just popped up out of nowhere. But it's cool because, I feel like as Black people, like we deal with the same things on both sides of the aisle, like regardless if you're on the right or the left. I feel like a lot of the same problems we all have, we have a commonality, whether we want to admit that or not. But, when you talk to people that are in state politics, it's more, they're not so used to dealing with people on both sides of the aisle as people in D.C. I feel like we all go to the same, restaurants, we all go to the same bars, we all go to the same parties, we're all in the same spaces a lot. And D.C. is 10 square miles, so like you're going to run into people on the other side. So I think learning how to like navigate being, a Republican in a lot of left-leaning liberal spaces was difficult. Because at first, when I first got here, I was like, I'm scared to tell people what I do. And now it's like, I don't care. At first it was kind of like, I'm scared of how people are going to react and respond. But at this point in my career, I don't really get to like hide from it anymore, you know? And I feel like I've like really come into being myself because I've like transitioned from being behind the camera to in front of the camera. And I think, you know, that's a hard skill that a lot of people aren't able to do both. And, you know, going in front of the camera and just putting yourself out there is not easy when you're like 26 years old and just, you know, I'm figuring it out as I go.
So you're doing a great job at it.
Thank you. With help of people like you.
Well, I mean, anything that I can do to ever help you, you know, I'm wanting to do so, because just being around you and seeing the way you move and seeing your success and the way that you attract it is such a unique experience. And I feel like I'm always taking notes around you. What is it that has led you to so much success? Like, is there a certain skill set? Is it a certain mindset? Because I feel like a lot of young people, especially in an industry like politics, being someone, even though you don't like to claim it, being someone that's in Generation Z, it's very easy for a lot of the old heads to not respect us and to not think that we bring a lot to the table. But when people look at you, they know that you're bringing the whole table. So what are you doing that's working?
Being authentic, being yourself. I feel like especially when it comes to not only just Gen Z, like knowing your audience. Like I feel like a lot of times in the party, some people that look like us get put in positions and are lacking the cultural relevance. And I think that's a huge part in when you're like talking to a specific demographic of people is being culturally relevant. Like Denzel Washington said that before in a quote. Like he said, it's not about race, it's about culture. And I feel like a lot of people miss the mark when it comes to that. And just being younger, you know, when you're talking to younger people, you got to go to places where younger people are looking at. You know, we're not on watching CNN all day like our grandparents are. You know, we're watching TikTok, we're on Twitter, you know, we're on the internet all day. Or we grew up with the internet, you know. So I think being strategic and knowing your audience, going to those places where those people are. I feel like that was the biggest thing for me in the campaign because, you know, obviously like our target demographic was talking to black men. And I was like, every black man I know, no one's watching the news. Like they go to podcasts for relationship advice, financial advice, political advice, like whatever you need, they're looking at a podcast for it. So, you know, I was like going into those places is very important. You know, you got to meet people where they are.
Yeah. Do you think that conservatives are finally getting better at tapping into culture?
Some of us are. Some of us are. We're moving in the right direction. I think because, you know, the president's such a like cultural phenomenon that it's easier, you know, now with him being in the White House because like, you know, he brings the culture. He has been a part of the culture, you know. So I think we are getting better. You know, we're not perfect. We're not there yet, but we're getting better. I think we're starting to win the culture war. Yeah. You know, I think we have a lot of work to do still, but we are getting better.
So do you ever feel like, especially in the Black conservative space, but in the conservative space in general, now that we're tapping more into culture, do you ever feel like that's a slippery slope? Because a question that I was asked recently is if somebody like Sexy Red wanted to start aligning with conservatives or aligning with Republicans, is that bad optics, or is it helpful to have this culturally relevant figure be a part of our orbit?
Culturally relevant to who?
The streets.
I'm just saying, that's the question you got to ask yourself. Like, you know, is that reflective of the culture? I mean, maybe parts of it. I don't know.
I mean, numerically speaking,
sure.
She's one of the best-selling female artists right now. I mean, most of them are in the asylum, like they're selling certified aluminum foil. But Sexy Red is out here getting hit records. So she is tapped into whether it's youth culture or Black culture or whatever hood rat culture that it is. A vote is a vote. So do you think it's worth aligning with her?
I wouldn't say aligning with her, but, you know, we're the party of everybody. We embrace everybody, you know, from the billionaire to, you know, I don't want to use that word. What is the nice way to say that? The street people. To the suburban people, whoever. Like, we're with everybody, you know, it doesn't matter. But I think the question is about, you know, cultural relevancy. The problem is that reflective of the culture, though? Because we need to ask ourselves what's wrong with our culture that's like, you know, one of the best-selling artists, you know? Yeah. I think that we need to resurface back to what is our culture now.
Right, the bigger question there.
Yes.
And, you know, I actually do agree with that. And I'm asking just, you know, playing devil's advocate a bit because I told you my stance on it. It's like someone like Sexy Red, if she wants to go out and endorse, you know, someone that's on the right, or if she wants to support conservatives, okay. I think there's a time and a place for that. But something that I personally found so deeply offensive was here you have Kamala Harris, this educated, allegedly black woman that is on stage making history, being the first black female presidential candidate who really had a close chance of winning in the beginning. And when we're watching this history unfold, instead of being able to look at her black excellence, her being this educated black woman, because black women aren't playing when it comes to getting these degrees. Black women get bored and go get new degrees. Why was it that was also the first rally where a female rapper, Meg Thee Stallion, comes up and twerks on stage? That's not the kind of history I feel like we should be wanting to make. And now I feel like there's this big divide in the black community where it's like, you have the people who feel like you can do both. You have the people who just want to be hood rats, and you have the people who don't want to be associated with that at all. So when we tap into cultural relevance, where do we even start when our own culture can't even figure itself out?
That's a good question. That's very good. I think we know what the culture is. I think it's other people that exploit the culture and change it into other things, and then we have people like Megan, and we have people like Cardi B, and we have people like Sexy Red that become like the face of the culture when, we've had Martin Luther King, we've had Coretta Scott King, we've had Malcolm X, we've had W.B. Du Bois, we've had
Janiyah Thomas.
Oh yeah, let's put me up there. But like we've had all these like, history change makers, the ladies from Hidden Figures, but this is what we represent now. Like how we go from that to this, we went from marching the streets for civil rights to, shaking your behind on a political campaign stage. Like,
and thinking that's freedom.
If that's what we are, like, I mean, it's freedom for somebody, but I'm not, shaming anyone, but it's just like, we need to resurface. Like, I think we know. I think it's just other people, they take and pick apart. It's like when you watch a Tyler Perry movie, like we know that's not every day.
Right.
But other people see it and they think that's every day. So that's the part they want to pull out and exploit and make that what we all are.
Yeah. So do you feel like there should be more gatekeeping and boundaries when it comes to politics of who we have coming to these events?
Yeah. I mean, I think we don't even need like celebrities technically to come out and like endorse. I feel like that's another problem we have. Like, why are we the only people that look at celebrities to dictate our political beliefs and like dictate the culture? Like, we make that as a group. We don't need to look to Jay-Z. We don't need to look to Beyonce to say like, this is who I should vote for.
Right.
I'm not living Beyonce's life. I don't got that kind of money. I'm not on that type of platform, Like, vote what, like, your values and your principles. Like, what matters to you today? Like, what's helping you today?
Yeah.
Like, don't focus on, like, what so-and-so said. They're not thinking about you. They don't know you.
Right.
Yeah, so it's important to vote what's important to you and your family and not let all these other people, that have billions and millions of dollars dictate what you think and how you believe.
Part of me feels like from a cultural standpoint, it kind of comes from, and hear me out, tell me if I'm sounding crazy.
I will.
I know you will. Okay, first, before I even say my stance on it, I want to ask you, so systemic racism, when would you say roughly that it ended? Like decade or era, when would you say that?
That's tough. Ended?
Ended. Like when would you say systemic racism stopped?
That's tough. I don't really have an answer to that, to be honest. I don't think I have an answer.
And I didn't for a while either. But somebody asked me that question on the spot, and it's like my go-to answer is like, okay, the second we got civil rights.
Yeah.
That's like the easy
that's what
answer.
the first thought that comes to my mind, but I'm like, is that the right answer? Like, I don't know, because I ain't had enough time to think about this.
Right. It's like, and not even trying to put you on the spot with it. It's just that was a question that someone asked me, and I had to really sit there and I thought about it, because I always want to look at something from the perspective of nuance. And when we were discussing, this friend and I were discussing, systemic racism ended on paper when we got all of our rights. We had all the same equal rights in this country as any other demographic.
Yeah.
But of course, realistically, it takes a while for the system to catch up with the policy.
Yeah.
So it took, I think it's safe to say, maybe a couple decades for the effects of systemic racism to start to shed off from our culture, from our country, from our society. But when I think the transition period really happened is I do look at culture for a lot of things, because culture has also been part of what has allowed Black people into more spaces. So if we look back at the 80s, for example, you have these mega stars. You have Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby, back when he had it together. You had Whitney Houston. Yeah. You had Janet Jackson.
Prince, don't forget Prince.
Don't forget, we'll never forget Prince. I mean, I play on his time. You had Donna Summer, Diana Ross. There was all these people. But something that a lot of them, if not all of them, have in common is they will talk about the things that they had to overcome even at the height of their careers.
Yeah.
So, for example, Whitney Houston and Janet Jackson talk a lot about how in the 80s they were the biggest stars in the world and they still were not allowed to have their videos on MTV for so long. And every time they do something with MTV, they remind them of that they weren't allowed to do that. So reason I bring that up is because I think that there was a point where it kind of shifted from systemic racism to systemic disempowerment, where they started realizing, oh, if these stars are going to be this larger than life thing and all these black people are looking up to these celebrities and politicians and or not politicians, but celebrities and athletes, then it became a lot of these left-wing institutions, such as Hollywood, started weaponizing culture against us.
Yeah.
So if you look, like, suddenly the shows like Family Matters stopped, Bill Cosby show stopped, and you started having more shows that were like either living single or just about boys in the hood. And like these shows that were about not having a solid family unit, that were about crime, about drugs, about all these different things that were very negative. And I feel like that was used in place to keep us mentally low vibrational.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see where?
Oh, no, I definitely see where you're going. I mean, because, like, even hip-hop culture, you know, makes a lot of money overseas, makes a lot of money over here. Like, everybody listens to rap music. You know? Well, at least most people. I'm going to say everybody, but most people do. But, like, you know, it is used to, like, you know, lower the vibration, as you said. Like, it is used to, like, hold us back, you know. We can't sit here and be like, you know, protesting gun violence, and then, like, the music we were playing and listening to is exactly that, you know? So it's, like, kind of contradictory, but it's those type of things that have been, like, exploited out of our culture that, like, keeps us where we are, you know? So I think that's a very interesting perspective.
How do we get out of that? Do you think it's possible?
Ooh, the Lord.
If God don't do it.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like, the family aspect. I think, you know, bringing back, you know, traditional families, you know, two-parent households, I think that would solve a lot of our problems, you know? I mean, that's not easy to do overnight. It might not even happen in the next 10 years, next 15 years. But I do see a change in, like, our generation wanting to see that come back.
Yeah.
I think we've seen, like, you know, the crack babies and, like, that era come out. And we're like, let's not be like that, you know? So I think a lot of people in our generation do want to see that traditional family come back, you know? I think whether you see that on TV, on Twitter, and social media, I don't believe that to be true, because I think those are the things that people want you to believe about us. I think that a lot of us do want to return back to that. I think if that would solve, like, crime problems, that would solve education problems, and that would help with the culture. I think if we brought that back, but how we get there, I don't know. Go to church, pray. So that's where we start.
I really do feel like a lot of black people genuinely want to see these positive changes happening, but it's, again, these major left-wing institutions that are all connected in so many different ways, especially in the entertainment spaces, that continue to uplift the sexy reds, uplift all these people that might be relatively talented or sometimes just not talented at all, in order to keep us brainwashed and borderline brain dead and functionally illiterate. And there's this also pushback, though, because I was actually looking at this recent study that showed that in our, like, age range, you know, between 25 to 34, black women are actually outpacing in graduations and getting degrees compared to white men who for so long have been the standard when it comes to education. And to me, that's interesting because, again, like I said, black women get bored and go get another degree. It's because we finally want better for ourselves. So it does make me wonder, why are black women not following suit as much as some of the other demographics? So in the sense that, like, black men are starting to shift more towards being more conservative, and black women are working so hard, but the hard work and the conservative values, while I feel like those are hand in hand, a lot of black women aren't shifting over, and Gen Z women as well are not shifting to being more conservative, while every other group seems to be.
I think Gen Z women are more open to it than, like, you know, my mom, my grandmother's generation. They might be a lost cause. But I think this is not even just a women thing. This is a black thing. Like, we are very emotional people. And when you put it in perspective of a female, like, it's really hard to separate, like, your emotions from logic, you know? If somebody's saying things to you, Democrats are really good at this. They message to emotions, you know. Like, even Obama's little speech, what he did with those little black boys in that, you know, campaign office, it's like they know how to play people's emotions. So I think that as long as we sit in that emotional space and don't take the time to separate the emotion and the logic and think clearly and not be so reactive to the first thing we hear, I think maybe we could get somewhere with Black women. But I mean, that's a long road. Yeah. That's a long road because that's asking somebody to do something they don't normally do, you know. And like the average person, even female or male, sometimes can't separate the two, you know. So I think, you know, if we took the time to separate the two, listen to things from a logical perspective and not in our feelings, and be less reactive and less emotional, I think we could bring more Black women into the party.
Do you think that the conservative movement and the right-wing space in general has a lot to offer for Black women?
Of course. Of course. I think for sure. I mean, I'm here. Absolutely. You know, we thrive over here. I think we're great over here. But I think that, you know, it takes more of just like multiple people like me, myself, you know, my auntie Lynn Patton.
Shout out to Lynn Patton. We don't play about Lynn Patton over here.
But like it takes people like that, like really showing up and going into our communities and talking to people and like no cameras, just like talking and being a normal person, like just meeting them where they are. Like we all, you know, we like to get our hair done. We can talk about things like that. We like Beyonce. Like, I mean, I might not like her views, but I like her music. And I know you do too.
Okay.
But it's like, if we go and find commonality with people and then, you know, talk about the hard topics, I think that would be where we start making more inroads. But I feel like a lot of times, like some people are scared to do that. They think we're going to get rejected. And I'm like, well, if you don't try, you're never going to know, you know? And I think it takes, you know, a village to go into these communities and talk to people, be in the hair salon, be in the barbershop, like talk to people real, like no gimmicks, like just being real and authentic and having a real conversation with people.
I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. It's like, I feel like the way that I've been most impactful when it comes to just like having one-on-one conversations with people with different views than me, I will sometimes just completely throw the politics out because when they look at us as people on the right, they assume that we're anti-Black, they assume we're coons, Uncle Toms, all these different things, and like we're just not people who are down to chill. And then the second that they start to realize like, oh, like we actually have a lot of common ground, then the conversations start to end up being a bit more organic, where it's more question-oriented, trying to understand the other side. And I feel like that has been the most impactful. I just feel like when it comes to winning over more Black females particularly, I get nervous sometimes that what we're going up against on the right is this whole system where the left is constantly pandering to Black women, constantly finding every single Black woman that they possibly can, especially if they're an immigrant or LGBT or any other victim bingo thing that they can throw the struggle on them for. They're going out of their way to do that. Because you have the women part, you have the minority part, and they're all about identity politics. And it's like, how do you compete with that? How do you convince more Black women that the right has a better system for them when the left is constantly giving them this false sense of elevation?
That's good. That's good. They do that. I think being more, talk about the results, like the tangible things, like, you know, less on the pandering and talk about what we can do, what we have done, what the president has done, you know, and how that benefits you. I think if you focus on the tangible things and like remove all the like, you know, tacky rhetoric and all that, you know, extra nonsense, I think that would help. But it's like, I feel like as a party, we don't do the best at messaging sometimes. Like we could do better on that. And, you know, that starts with like having people that are able to speak to people like that and able to talk and go in those communities and talk to people, you know. I think when we focus and, you know, fix our messaging and talk more about the solutions, more about the results, you know, and not so much talking at people, but talking with them.
Right.
Because I feel like, you know, there's some people, I'm not going to say nobody's name, but that, you know, do that where they're talking to Black people and they are like aggressive with their rhetoric and their tone. And it's like, if you come at somebody like that, they're not going to want to hear what you have to say.
Right.
It's like you could be saying everything right, but it's like if your tone isn't there, like no one's going to listen to you. You know? It's like the second you set somebody's emotions off, it's over. So I think, you know, talking with people, not talking at them is a big step.
Yeah, I say that all the time. It's like, and this is something I've had to work on too. I won't even be a hypocrite. Like my early media days, like I started in 2021 making TikToks and stuff just about culture. And what I was attempting to do was call out the issues in our culture and bring attention to it so that we can start to fix it. But instead, what it came off as is just me constantly degrading Black people. But I wasn't trying to. I really was trying to uplift, and it starts with identifying the problem. But it turned off so many people that I potentially could have impacted and influenced in a positive way, because instead of being like, oh yeah, like maybe we should, start looking more into our DAs and stuff, it was instead just like, Black people commit too much crime. It's like, no one's going to want to hear that. And the constant attack on Black fathers, like, yes, the Black
Don't get
father,
me started on that one.
Okay, because I know you're a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
You don't play about Mr. Thomas. Shout out to Mr. Thomas. But that being said, it's like, I get it. Black father absence, I am the first one to say that is a major issue. But can we just for once highlight the good Black fathers that are out there? Can we do more to talk about the positive Black entrepreneurs? We don't have to constantly talk about Black people being broke in Section 8. We can talk about the over 2 million Black millionaires in America today, most of which I'm pretty sure are self-made. Like, there's so much excellence that can be discussed, and so many more nuanced conversations that I feel like we're missing out on having that we need to.
I think there's nothing wrong with calling out the problems, but like I said, it's a way to do it.
Right.
And like when we're talking about Black fatherhood, I think the misconception is like absent Black fathers. I don't think that's the case. I think Black men actually do show up for their kids. Now, I think people misconstrue that of whether they're with the woman or not. That's where the misconception is. That's probably not the case.
Right.
But showing up for your kids, Black men show up for their children, And I feel like the media always likes, especially TV, not with Tyler Perry, likes to act like Black men are just disconnected from their families, deadbeat dad. And it's like, that is not true. Like, if you talk to my dad, he'll tell you all his friends, they show up for their kids. Right. They might not be with the lady, but they show up for their kids. And, and we can ask people to be perfect, some people don't stay together. But showing up for your kids, I think Black men need more credit for that.
Yeah. And I honestly, I feel like at the point now, it's almost a scapegoat whenever we talk about a Black issue. So I just did a video recently where I was talking about why are so many Black students functionally illiterate. It's like, depending where you read, it's usually around 80% of Black students cannot read to the standard testing levels. Yeah. And honestly, it's not just Black kids that are having this struggle, because I saw that only I think it was maybe 45% of white students are at a standardized level. So it's a problem across the board. But I feel like the reason why it's so bad in the Black household, a lot of people just say it's because of father absence. There are two parents in the household married, and the kids still cannot read. Yeah. What I think it comes down to, when it comes to that cultural element, just as an example, is we all know how to code switch. Code switching is an art form in the Black community, knowing there's a time and a place. There's a time to use slang. There's a time to be more, playful or unprofessional. But when you are at work, you need to lock in. And I feel like what's happening with these Black kids is they're going to class and they are not locking in. And I think we need to start calling on these teachers, stop allowing slang in the classroom. Make these kids code switch. Yeah. If a kid cannot speak properly for 50 minutes during your class, then you have failed them. Yeah. Because the whole point of the code switch is to switch. Yeah. But it's like these kids going to class and they're still talking about on gang, on phone them. It's like these kids can't read or write because they're not even using the proper English language.
I do get some responsibility on the teachers, but I think we put too much responsibility on them. Like, it is not Miss, Johnson's job to raise your child. Fair. Like, you need to be at home doing homework with your kid. You need to be at, when I used to come home from school, my mom would sit down with me and do math with me because I did not like to do my math homework. But like, my parents were there to sit there and read with me and to do all the things with me. Like, you shouldn't rely on a school system to raise your kid. Like, half the stuff I've learned did not come from that, And I think it's more about the parents being there for their kids and really helping them make sure they are focused on their education. Like, yes, the teachers just do their job during the day, but it's like, that's not enough. Like, what are you doing at home after hours? What are you doing in the summertime, you know? And then not only that, some Black kids, like, if you're growing up in, I don't know, Baltimore somewhere, you see so many distractions every day. Poverty has a lot to do with this. You see so many distractions every day. You see poverty, you see crime. You may not have your dad there. How can you focus on school?
True.
Like, how can you actually sit there and really focus on school when you're worried about what you're going to eat next? So a lot of this has to do with the family cultural problem, But it's like, it's not just, we can't pinpoint it on one or two things, you know? It's about people being there. And even if the parents aren't there, like, I think as a community, like, we need to show up for each other more than we do. Like, there was a time, like, if you talk to, like, our parents' generation or, like, our grandparents' generation, like, Miss Johnson or Miss Susan down the street, you know, could spank them.
Okay.
They don't do that now.
Dorfine didn't play.
Exactly.
That wasn't even my option.
Like, my next door neighbor, like, he helped me. Like, you know, like, he was there for me after school. Like, their parents were there. My parents were there for their kids, you know. People do not do that anymore because we have lacked a sense of community.
Yeah.
You know, our community is on the internet.
Right.
On Instagram. It's not in the neighborhood anymore. So I think we need to focus on building our communities and showing up for each other.
Wait, that is so real. Our communities are not in the neighborhood anymore. It's on Instagram. That's crazy. Letting social media raise your kids is part of why we have so many of these problems.
Exactly.
Too. I never even thought about it that way. But that's wild because, you know, the old phrase is it takes a village to raise a kid. Where's the village? The village
People don't even know their neighbors no more. Like,
right. I don't think I know the name of anybody that lives on either side of me. Like, and it's not that I'm not friendly. Like, I'll smile, and living in Los Angeles, sometimes I get a smile back, sometimes I get a and don't give me a side eye because I'm gonna hit you with a now we both look crazy.
right?
You know, I do. When I hear you, it just makes me so happy to know that you are getting on camera more and that you're leading some of these conversations and knowing just how successful, again, your work was with Black media, getting Trump into office. I am curious when it came to your connections in the Black media space, how open were they with talking to you and talking to people on the right?
More than you would think, to be honest. I think a lot of, because the sentiment I got from a lot of people was Republicans don't talk to me. They don't come to me. And then half of them don't even know where to find people or who to reach out to, you know? So it's like, if you really want that, you know, if you really want that relationship, you got to go get it. You got to go find it. You can't be scared, you know? But I think once, you know, people like me, Emery, you know, reaching out to different people, especially this time around, like, you know, when I first started doing it, it was a little harder, but like doing it on the campaign, like a lot of people were more receptive. And some of, like, you know, the older news stations that have been around, like radio stations that have been around, and, you know, there's older people that are like my grandmother's age. Sometimes that would be a little difficult. They would try to be receptive, but, like, you know, that generation is so locked in with the Democrats that it's really hard to change their minds. But it was way more than you would believe. And I think that if we had more people, like, this ain't a one person's task. Like, we really want to do this. Like, we need 20 of me, you know, and not just during election year, like right now.
Right.
You know, going to these radio stations, going to these newspapers, like making sure somebody knows who you are, making sure they know how to get in contact with people on our side of the aisle. Because the Democrats, like, they take it for granted because they get it naturally. You know, we have to go work for it.
That makes a lot of sense because even like other right-wing commentators will reach out to me and be like, why am I never on Fox? I'm like, have you talked to anybody at Fox? They're like, no. I'm like, have you tried to talk to anybody at Fox? They're like, no. I'm like, so why would you be on Fox if you didn't talk to these people? So when it comes to these left-wing outlets, it's like, take that same mindset and multiply it by 50.
Exactly.
It's like, has anybody tried to contact the Shade Room? Have they tried to contact TMZ or Hollywood Unlocked or any of these outlets? And for a long time, the answer was no. Because I think people are so jaded, understandably, but people have become so jaded with the thought that, oh, we are censored and kicked out of these spaces that they just don't even try anymore.
Yeah.
And the second you just lay down and accept defeat, then they're not going to go out of their way to platform you when there's another side that is going out of their way to build these relationships.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about me, you know, I'm not going to take no for an answer.
Right.
So
Okay.
you're going to be my best friend so I get what I want, you know? And I think more people need to be more aggressive. Like, you got to go get it. You know, it's not going to come to you. Like, they're not looking for people like us, you know, but we got to go out there and get it.
Right. I love that so much because when I even think of like my role at PragerU, people are like, oh, you're DEI hire. They heard your backstory. They saw you're Black. They're like, let's put them on camera. No, it took me years of harassing those people just to get a shot. Shout out to PragerU. And, you know, honestly, it made me appreciate this role and this show so much more because I heard no so many times. And every time they said no, I said, okay, so where are we going?
Yeah.
I said, okay, no, so what's next?
Yeah.
And it was honestly the biggest life lesson for me. That goes to show, like, one, trust in God's timing, and two, trust that yes is coming if it's what's in God's plan. And Janiyah Thomas, you are the standard of that. Well, Janiyah, I always appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Let's go get some food, yeah.
All right.
Thank you, cousins, for tuning in for yet another episode of Respectfully. Be sure to find Janiyah Thomas on all social media platforms at Janiyah R. Thomas. We're going to have links in the description, and you are going to want to keep up with all the incredible work that she's doing. And make sure that you like, comment, share, and subscribe. I will see you soon.